In the summer of 2016, it happened. I recently tied the knot with my long-term partner. During our 12 years together, we made multiple summer and winter mountain trips, complete with camping, luxurious hotel stays, and snowboarding on the slopes. It was only natural that we wanted to spend our first few weeks as husband and wife doing this. We reserved a mountainside camping across the nation for a duration of 20 days. Since our dogs share our love of the great outdoors and are always going camping with us, we figured it would be best to bring them along. Our 2-day road adventure finally ended when we arrived to the mountain, where we promptly set up camp and prepared for an extended stay. A sight to behold. We had already met several other campers just a few days into our journey. Because we are seasoned campers, inexperienced campers often come up to us and beg for tools or supplies when they notice that we are well prepared. We're always delighted to lend a hand to anyone in need, whether it's with matching matches, sugar, cream, or assistance setting up their equipment. She first made herself known to us around day 4 or 5. Since we were never told her name, I shall call her she or her. We were enjoying some drinks and card games in the shade of one of our big pine trees on the border of our site when she suddenly materialized. Out of nowhere, she appeared. She asked if she could pet the dog. Not even my dogs were able to see her coming. All it took was her voice to send them into a panic. I gently declined her request because the dogs were already somewhat agitated. Standing at the perimeter of our location, she continued. Remained motionless, just existing without uttering a word. She didn't seem to be fixated on us or anything else. Should she have any needs? I inquired. No, she replied. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, she simply disappeared. People with brain injuries are no strangers to strange conduct or lack of social skills. In fact, I've seen it all in my line of work. So, I wasn't going to dismiss this individual as unsettling just yet, but she certainly piqued my interest. I watched as she nonchalantly strode up to a campsite just down the trail from ours and entered. She started erecting an even more diminutive one-person tent from her rucksack, even though there was an existing little tent at the location. It was obvious that 2 young girls lived in the other tent the day before as we watched them set it up. We didn't have any further interactions with her that day, but we did observe that the owners of the other tent on the site were also absent for most of the day and didn't come back that night. To get ready for the day ahead, I walked to the camp showers the following morning. I noticed that lady was reading a book in her tent as I strolled past her site. There was an open tent door. As I continued on my way to the bathroom for a shower, I paid it no mind. Upon returning from my shower, I observed that her tent had been closed, but it was still jiggling, so I could tell that someone was inside. After that, she made her arrival very obvious. She opened her tent as I was walking up to mine, and I could tell she was naked the second I did. After that, she positioned herself just inside the tent's entrance, extended her body completely, raised her arms high in the air, and thrust her chest forward as if it were a mating ritual specifically for me. She emitted what sounds like an exotic moan as she did this. She was clearly trying to impress me by acting. After reporting the spectacle I had just witnessed to my wife, I proceeded to my location. It was funny, but we laughed it off and continued our day trip to a waterfall destination. We saved gas by not having to drive to the trailhead. It was conveniently located near the campgrounds. Just 2 more kilometers to the trailhead, and we were there. We were moving at a decent rate, so when we reached the trail, we paused to capture the surrounding mountains and photographs before continuing into denser vegetation. My wife finally made her way out of the campground after sitting there for what felt like 5 minutes, taking pictures. It seemed like a coincidence at first. After all, she is staying here, and this track is quite common. However, she came to a complete halt and remained motionless the moment she realized I was staring at her. Just standing there, doing nothing in particular, and sending us creepy vibes, the same attitude as when we first met. For the first time ever, I told my wife, "I think we have a stalker." She looked confused, then cringed as she saw where I was staring. It occurred to me again that maybe she's merely trekking the trail. It wouldn't be a major issue. Thus, we proceeded swiftly up the trail, with her keeping a constant distance behind us. At this stage, she had somewhat captivated our dogs, with our youngest dog repeatedly turning around to observe her. I finally decided to pull over for water and let this woman go because I was getting a little tired of the dog looking back every so often. So when we halt, what does she do except stand there? This is getting close to the suspenseful level of a horror film, and I'm beginning to question the girl's motivations, so I guess we should be worried. The OSIT factor reached a new high when the person stood still and refused to pass us. Since the shorter circle was barely half a kilometer away, my wife and I decided to return to our camp and shorten the trek. By jogging every time we turned, we were able to put some distance between ourselves and her, and eventually she disappeared from view. Later that night, we saw her again. My wife made the decision to use the camp showers for her nighttime shower. She informed me that our pursuer was in the restrooms, having a shower as well, when she got back to our tent. On this occasion, though, she seemed to be preparing for a night out on the town with 2 other females. It was understandable that the girls would be preparing for a night on the town, as there is a ski resort nearby with a number of nightclubs and pubs. Those 2 girls we observed setting up shop at her location were the ones she was accompanied by this time. It was immediately apparent to my wife that our stalker buddy, the 2 females, and herself were not familiar with one another, as she stated. Our stalker was trying to be friendly with the females and even sort of invited herself to go out with them on their planned night out, so it was obvious they were close friends. We are familiar with this ski town, and the girls insisted on meeting at a particular restaurant before heading to the bar. At 10 o'clock in the evening, we found out that the restaurant they had recommended to her was actually closed. They were so deceiving her over her intentions. The stalker also repeatedly asked, "Are you sure this place?" But they managed to persuade her. She departed for her tent to complete her preparations, leaving her 2 pals to use the restroom to apply their final touches of cosmetics. Our new stalker was the target of ridicule and mockery from our other 2 pals. My wife continued to say, after she departed, acting like elementary school girls, these young adults were in their 20s. That isn't something my wife can handle. She felt compelled to address the girls' conduct, regardless of whether they were stalkers or not. They were reprimanded for their actions by my wife. After the girls calmed down and told my wife about the stalker female, they said that while they were staying with a friend in the ski resort, she had pitched her tent on their property. Upon their return, they discovered that she had been living at the location without permission. Without any prior knowledge of them, she had just decided to claim a small portion of their site. The females claimed they were angry with her and wanted her to leave, so they were intentionally making her feel uncomfortable. However, she refused to depart. My wife naturally wanted to know why they didn't inform the park warden about her. They claimed they didn't want to cause a big fuss because they were departing the following day. So, we don't know what transpired between them and the made-up plans for a late dinner and clubbing. At around 3 in the morning, out in the middle of the night, outside our camper, we were all startled by a scream that made our skin crawl. I remember thinking, holy shit, that must be some kind of wild animal. When I first laid eyes on it, I am both startled and fascinated. My wife is shivering, and the dog is barking. As I remove the window covering, I am met with the sight of her, frozen in place on the sidewalk outside our trailer. When she seemed to look directly at me, I had the window cover lowered around 8 or 10 centimeters. My pulse is racing. For crying out loud. She turns quietly and walks back to her tent after staring at me for what felt like an age. Our trailer is securely locked, so I go check. We were able to fall back to sleep after an hour and a stiff whiskey. Friday will be the next day. Our friends from a nearby big city are spending the weekend with us in the Highlands. We are thrilled to spend a few days with them because it has been quite some time since we last saw them. She reappears as before, out of nowhere, while they are still 15 minutes away from our place, erecting their tent. And just like that, she appears. However, she is currently on our site. Because I forgot to let our friends know about her before she came, they were friendlier to her than I was. She begged me again to let her pet my dog, who was barking the whole time. I stated something along the lines of, "She isn't being very friendly towards you right now, so I would prefer you didn't." She refrained from petting my dog and instead stood there, glaring at me as if she were planning to dismember me. She then remarks on how our birdie's tent is identical to hers, but with a larger sleeping capacity, after noticing the brand while our friend is still putting it up. After sensing my unease and the creepiness in her presence, my friend simply says, "Oh yay, cool," and continues to set things up. She then proceeds to take hold of the hammer and tent pegs, claiming she will assist him in setting it up due to her previous experience. My friend turns me down and wants his tools returned. Then the psychopath looks down on you. A hammer, though, increases the oh shit factor. This time around, she merely abandons her belongings and bolts. Our friends hear me out as I detail the events of the past several days, and they all agree that we should keep a close check on her. Now that she had taken over their site, the two girls who had been using it had already left. We're feeling fairly well after drinking all day, and it's now Friday night. At this point, it might be 11 o'clock in the evening. As soon as she returns to our location, she inquires, "Hey, you guys seem to have a lot of extra room with a tent and a camper. Do you think I could stay with you guys tonight? We could have a lot of fun in there together." My friend is feeling fairly well after drinking all day, so he asks directly, "Did you just propose a gangbang to us?" Meanwhile, I'm sipping my whiskey in my camp chair, trying to process everything. My presence had thus far gone unnoticed by her. After that, she tilts her head to the side, eyes me down, and mutters, "I like your friend." With a "what the hell," she turns around and goes away into the night towards the forest. Now we're all frightened that she might come back. At that moment, I made up my mind to contact the park warden if we encounter her in a disturbing manner again. This needs to stop. We all decide to go to the restrooms together to get ready for bed because the night is coming to a close. Pulling on my hoodie, my wife yells, "Babe, look. It was a set and it's practically ruined. Bleeding all over. There is nothing but clutter, trash, garments, and food." All right, I figured. This is strange. Possibly a bear was there. No, we would have been aware of it. The tent is no longer there, I then realized. She departed, leaving the site in a state of disarray. Fortunately, as we were making our way back from the restroom, the park patrol was already at the place where the mess had occurred, finishing up their fire rounds. We informed them about a female who was acting strangely who was staying here. Our interaction with the two girls earlier in the week led us to believe that she might be squatting on the property. Until the very final day of our journey, we did not see her again. Not far from our location is a fantastic tiny vantage point that provides breathtaking views of the valley and river below. Observing the sun set behind the mountains was a picture-perfect evening. It was a touching way to finish a picture-perfect honeymoon. We had finally put her to rest, but then she materialized out of nowhere again. While perched on a couple of securely fastened chairs at the lookout, we captured images of the valley below. My wife notices the distant mountain as she peers through the camera's viewfinder. As we descend the hillside towards the valley, she stands in the woods, observing us. In her last act, she ascended the mountainside and casually sat on a boulder next to the seats, right beside us. She remains motionless, utterly silent. After giving me a little wink, my wife gets the bright idea of having me snap one final photo of the landscape. I immediately grasp her concept and arrange myself such that this lady will be in the shot. Before we left the area, taking in the breathtaking surroundings, my wife insisted on getting a photo of this woman in case something went wrong. However, after we returned to our campsite for the night, she remained silent. After some thought, we both decided that this woman clearly had significant mental health difficulties. Even though she was completely out of her depth socially, we saw her try to befriend the two females who had succored her so badly. Still, she did things that were quite embarrassing for a socially respectable person. While we were standing there, I thought for sure she was going to brandish a knife and slaughter us all. On top of that, I feel like we were terrorized by the midnight screams, the stalking, and the dashes into the woods at night, all of which were meant to frighten us. I do have the photo saved on a thumb drive. If it's okay, we may submit it in a pixelated format. The photo may appear to be a simple headshot to the outside eye, but for us, it serves as a poignant reminder of our incredible journey together and the beginning of our miraculous marriage to our honeymoon stalker.